اور آپ لوگ دیکھتے رہیے ٹورانٹو 360 ٹی وی صابر گایا کے ساتھ.
Phobia, Kashmir, and now CAA. For those of you who know Yusuf, he is relentless in his effort to bring justice to those who are oppressed, regardless of their race, religion, or backgrounds. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you now to Brother Yusuf, who will be officiating this program. Thank you very much.
And thank you and good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this very important conversation and discussion on recent events unfolding in India, particularly with respect to the Citizenship Amendment Act and also recent developments in Kashmir. We also ask that there be no photography or video taking from the floor. We, the organizers, are recording this event, so there's no need for any of you to make your own recordings.
So good evening, everybody. So my name is Yusuf Syed. I will be the MC for a couple of minutes, then I will be handing over to the moderators. So now what I'm going to do is I'll tell you something about our organization, Canadians Against Oppression and Persecution. So a couple of months ago, it's not too long ago, so I came up with an idea. I've been having some discussion, on the rising oppression and persecution in India, mob lynching, and then this Kashmir issue. So I had a couple of discussions with a lot of people, and why don't we form an alliance of some institutions, the people, individuals, and the organization, and come up with a body that can very persuasively discuss this issue and raise the issue, and we can address the advocacy and the persecution and oppression internationally and nationally. So I had several discussions with this gentleman, Brother Munaf, who listened to me for hours, and he gave his an idea. He gave lots of ideas, and he not only listened to me, not only gave an ideas, he stood by with me from the beginning till today. And this journey will go long. Not only that, he helped me in forming this organization, Canadians Against Oppression and Persecution, but he brought his own skills and brought lots of people into this organization.
Once a motion is given, then what I can do is go to the clerks, go to our whips, and get unanimous consent in the House so that all parties are aware of what is going on in India, which is regarded as the biggest democracy in the world, and yet by stealth they are taking away the rights of others. So please, whenever it is given to me, I will let you know when the motion is coming. I urge you all to write to whichever MP you have in your riding and ensure that this issue percolates to the top. Thank you very much.
Our first panelist today is Dr. Chinaya Jangam. Dr. Jangam is an assistant professor in the Department of History at Carleton University.
Our second speaker is Shama Naqshbandi, who is a British Kashmiri lawyer and writer.
He's based in India. Dr. Faizan Mustafa. Professor Faizan Mustafa is a senior constitutional law teacher who's presently working as the Vice Chancellor of Nalsar University of Law, Hyderabad.
Jai Bhim to you all. Thank you very much, and especially Canadians Against Oppression and Persecution, and particularly Munaf Bhai and Yusuf for inviting me for this very important event. Amit Shah is the Home Minister of the country, and within less than 6 months of the second term, India has seen very unprecedented changes, particularly in terms of the constitution, and also in terms of citizenship, and also in terms of the way in which the vision of India has transformed in last 4 or 5 months is unbelievable. So in that context, what we see is that there is a systematic attempts by the government in India to transform the very idea of India. The idea of India in which most of you might have, I see a lot of elders who might have seen India very differently. Like, that's what I was talking to friends, that, the India in which we grew up, even I grew up, like, this was in 80s and 90s, and the way in which we related to each other, the way in which we understood what government means, what responsibility of the government, it has changed. So in that context, what I want to do is that, in the 10 minutes I have been given, I made few slides so that, you can have some better understanding of things. So what I will do is that I will run over this historical context in which what is happening. That's why what happens is that, the fight against CAA is about justice, equality and dignity. And that's why, what we are saying is that, it's a truth, the human truth about, dignity of all human beings. So in this context, what we see is that, this law violates the fundamentals of the nation. So in this context, what you see is that, we all have to oppose it. Thank you very much for your time.
Dr. Jangam, for providing us with such a great historical and political context for understanding some of the current developments around the Citizenship Amendment Act, which, as we know, in combination with the National Register of Citizens, is threatening to strip many Muslim Indians who have lived in India all of their lives of their citizenship, something which the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has just issued a warning about a few days ago. Now I'd ask our next panelist, Shama, to please come to the podium.
I think what's happening in India today is deeply disturbing. And I think it's really important that we all acknowledge and we feel that discomfort. As human beings, I think we have a natural instinct to want to believe that what's happening can't be so bad. We live in a democracy. We believe in the ideas of human liberty and individual freedoms, and we want to believe it's not possible for a democracy to turn into a tyrannical, authoritarian regime. But when we look at past atrocities and monstrous events, there's always the perennial question, how was it able to get so far? Why did ordinary people not intervene? And how did all this happen and with so little opposition? And I think we need to understand that the path to atrocity is a process. The Holocaust did not begin with the gas chambers. It began with propaganda and controlled media, dehumanization and scapegoating. It began with discriminatory laws, an obsession with national identity, and a sense that that national identity is somehow under threat from outsiders. A disdain for human rights, roundups, internments, and deportations. And all these things are happening or are being proposed in India today. This evening, I was asked as a British Kashmiri and as someone who frequents the region and has been frequenting the region for many, many years now, and who has friends and family still living in the region, to talk about the CAA and NRC in the context of recent developments in Kashmir. And I think while at times quite distinct, the issues have recently been conflated by political commentators. Kashmir is already an Orwellian nightmare. And I think what's happening in Kashmir is both a warning and a lesson for the Indian people of what happens when things go too far, when there are no checks on power, and why we should never allow the normalization of these sorts of assaults on our democracies. We should never allow our leaders to push the bounds of what is morally and legally permissible, to empty us of all that we hold dear. So we need to continue to feel, to hurt, and to be appalled and outraged, and never allow ourselves to become numb to these abuses of powers. We need to keep having events like this and to keep talking, protesting, lobbying. And we need to get organized and join forces and seek allies, because those who wish to oppress us are also seeking allies. And finally, I think we need to recognize that what we're doing and why we're doing this is not because we believe it is the right thing to do, but as the gentleman before me demonstrated, because it is in line with the founding principles and constitution of India and for the welfare of all Indians and the world at large. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I just want to, we're going to hear from Professor Faizan Mustafa, and this is a recorded statement, a recorded message that will be played now.
I'm grateful to Yusuf for giving me this opportunity to talk to each one of you, and I'm so grateful to each one of you for finding time to come and discuss a very important and very contentious and controversial issue about the new citizenship law which India has recently enacted, and the possibilities of a process of national NRC. As all of you are aware that recently we had a national register of citizens updation in the state of Assam. Of course, it was monitored by the Supreme Court of India. No other state so far had experienced what National Register of Citizens would be really all about. But the experience of Assam has given us some very, very painful lessons, and that's why there is a kind of anxiety amongst the ordinary Indian people, illiterate people, many of them who do not have all the documents or have documents where there is discrepancy in terms of spellings. So my job in next 8 to 9 minutes is to talk to you about the constitutional issues involved in the Citizenship Amendment Act, NPR, and NRC. Now, first talking of Citizenship Amendment Act, of course, Indian Parliament is very well within its jurisdiction. The subject of citizenship is a federal subject, and therefore the federal parliament is entitled to pass law on this. Now, whenever any law is passed in India, the constitutionality of such a law is examined from two perspectives. One, whether the legislature has the jurisdiction, and in this case, as I said, that the parliament does have the jurisdiction, and nobody other than parliament has any jurisdiction to legislate on this subject. Therefore, some of the state assemblies which have passed resolutions against the Citizenship Amendment Act are just scoring a political point. Two, whether the law is in conflict with our civil liberties or fundamental rights chapter, as we call it in India. Now, one of the fundamental rights under our constitution, like any other constitution, is right to equality. And right to equality in India means right against arbitrariness. Our Supreme Court has said that an arbitrary decision clearly violates right to equality. Now, to meet the requirement of equality, you can make a classification. That classification, of course, has to be reasonable. And the reasonableness of the classification is decided on the basis of a test which Supreme Court calls that your classification should be based on intelligible differentia, meaning thereby what you take in and what you leave out, the differences between them must be very definite, intelligible differences. So you can't say that you will make a law for men and not for women. You can't say you will make law for tall people and not for the short people, or you will make law for North Indians and not for South Indians, because all these classifications are prohibited classifications. They are not based on any intelligible differentia. When national NRC will be taken, since this awareness about documents is not there, it will be a huge crisis. Poor people, women, transgenders will be worst affected. And that's why in Assam we have seen that women whose name do not appear in the voter list because the child marriages are rampant and they go to other villages and husbands can't confer citizenship on them. A large number of them have been excluded. So we are not talking of exclusion of foreigners. We are basically talking of exclusion of our own citizens. We are trying to put our citizens in huge problem, and that's why I feel that this law is not a very, very wise initiative.
I have a question. What if the Supreme Court of India does not reject this judgment? This is question number one. Number two, what is the role of NRIs for settling this question?
No, I didn't listen the second question correctly. But as far as first question is concerned, in terms of possibility, Supreme Court is most likely to uphold this law, because to examine the constitutionality of a law, the court makes a narrower inquiry. And in their narrower inquiry, it is possible for the court to say that, well, it is based on reasonable classification and it has a rational object to achieve. You see, courts can go both ways. Right now, the way the Indian Supreme Court has been behaving in the recent past, in most cases, it is accepting the position of the government. And therefore, even in this case, if the court upholds the constitutionality of this law, one should not be surprised. But people of the country are not governed by the narrow technicalities of examining constitutionality of the law. And that's why they are on the streets to tell us that even though the court may uphold a law, but this law clearly impinges on the founding principles of the Republic. This law violates secularism. This law arbitrarily includes certain religious groups and arbitrarily excludes other groups. This law does not cover all the neighboring countries. It does not cover all the persecuted people of the three countries which have been included in this law. And therefore, they are on the streets. And many a times, this has been the experience of the constitutional democracies, that when the Supreme Court or the Parliament do not really remain wedded to the high principles of the Constitution, the citizens of the country force the government to, turn around and come to the basic ideas on which the Republic was constituted.
I think, as I mentioned before, that a lot of media spotlight has been placed on the CAA, and it's really dented India's image in sort of the international arena. So I think for NRIs and those living outside of India, it's really important to continue to speak out, lobby, get your politicians engaged and involved, and to support groups that are, advocating, supporting anti-CAA movements within India as well. So I think that is the first thing, expressing solidarity and really speaking out about it, because, if we don't speak out about these things, people are able to get away. As we've seen with Article 370, there was no one to speak out and no one to dissent. So it's very important to keep putting the spotlight and the pressure on India. India is obviously a very large trading partner with many countries, and it's very important that from all angles a lot of pressure is being put to bear on India as a country.
My name is Ehtisham Rizvi from Urdu, Canada. It is a general question, or rather a suggestion I'm asking it. In this whole episode, whenever we talk about the Amendment Act and NRCs and all those things, I feel that it all happened due to Bangladesh. The all 1.9 million people who were tested for their citizenship, most of them came from Bangladesh. Should we ask from them why you are doing all those things? Stop, please. You are putting the Indians actually into test, for the citizenship. This is my question.
Number one, it is correct that on the western side, there hasn't been much of the migration. So what is today Pakistan, from that side, not many people really came after 1948. And everyone who came from the western side till 19 July 1948 has been given citizenship by the Constitution itself. Now, it is a myth that these 1.9 million people who have been excluded from NRC Assam are Bangladeshis. In fact, not even one of them has so far been found to be Bangladeshi. We have about 500,000 Hindu Bengalis who migrated from Bangladesh, and their refugee certificates have not been taken into account. Most of the people of this 1.9 million people are our own citizens, born on our territory, who have been excluded because of some discrepancy in the document. So it is not even a question of absence of documents. The case I was talking about in my presentation of this lady whose grandfather's name was there in the voter list of 1966, 1951. She has a PAN card, she has a Ration card, she has Aadhaar card. So she has revenue payment receipts. There was an army officer who had the documents of 1926, and he was given the President of India's Appreciation Award, yet he has not been included. So we have people from the former President of India's family, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, who find excluded. So to say that all these 1.9 million people are illegal infiltrators into India is a myth. In fact, the anxiety of government of India to bring in CAA was because of this realization that their false narrative of last 3-4 decades, that millions and millions of Bangladeshis have entered Assam, has been busted by this NRC of Assam, because most of the people who have been excluded are not Muslims, but rather Bengali Hindus. And therefore, to give them citizenship, they are bringing citizenship, they have brought in Citizenship Amendment Act. And that's why the speed with which they brought it, because next year Assam is having general elections, and BJP may lose elections there unless they give citizenship to these Bangla-speaking Hindus. Now, we must also understand that this whole question of Bangladeshis entering into India should also be understood from another perspective. After the creation of Bangladesh, the possibility of Muslims crossing over from a Muslim majority state to a Hindu majority state is not very high. And therefore, most of the people who entered from Bangladesh are not Muslims, but rather Hindus. And in recent past, Bangladesh economy is doing better than Indian economy in terms of GDP, in terms of number of social indicators like infant child mortality and other indicators. Bangladesh is ahead of India. And you will be surprised that we have 1 million Indians living in Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is one of the top remittance center now to India. So this is another big myth. In fact, the whole problem is there because the extreme Hindu right has been creating a false narrative of millions and millions of Bangladeshis entering into India. And our Supreme Court also got carried away by the report of the BJP appointed governor, Mr. S.K. Sinha of Assam. And in the judgment of the Supreme Court uses terms like vultures for these illegal migrants. And that shows that the court does not really understand the whole issue of migration as such. We know that the border is porous, and we know that there are floods sometimes, and therefore,
So my question is for Dr. Changam. Although I don't think it has been explicitly stated as an intent, if you go online, you can see there's a lot of RSS and other Hindu nationalist content out there that's saying that they want to form a Hindu Rashtra or a Hindu nation. Is that something that's a realistic notion, or do you think that it is just hyperbole and they're just doing this to rile up their base?
The intention of the citizenship law, NRC and CAA, one of the important things is that, this whole idea of Hindu Rashtra, like Savarkar, when he imagined the bunch of thoughts and they had this RSS foundation, everything happened. So this whole idea of Hindutva, the foundation of Hindutva philosophy is that this whole idea that Karma Bhumi and Janma Bhumi. And this where they say that your birth and also the place of worship should be in India. Like that is what Hindutva's philosophy or Hindutva's idea of Indian. When they define who is Indian, who should be Indian, they must have worshipping place in India, and also they should be born in India. So that's why what you see that if you look at Citizenship Amendment Act, it excludes Muslims, it doesn't mention Christians, but Jews. Basically, whoever has worshipping place outside the country, they don't fit into their idea of Indian. So even if there are Muslims in India, they should be second-rate citizens. That's what Savarkar says in his bunch of thoughts. So that's why what we are seeing is that, this suddenly after second term of Modi, within 6 months, they are passing so many laws, precisely because this realization of this agenda. It is not, something, they are doing it out of no brain or anything. Because particularly the way Home Minister of India imagines, he is implementing RSS imagination of India. And they are doing it in quick succession precisely because they have 4 years to go. So they are thinking that, people will be tired of protests. And Indian government is capable of building institutions and running them. I studied in government schools and government universities. If any government take initiatives to help the marginalized people, help the people who feel that they're excluded, and it's a state initiative, state responsibility to include them and go with them. You don't need religious organizations or militant organizations to run as parallel institutions which don't follow any law of the land. So that's my message.
Thank you so much. I know we were running a little late, but on the plus side, they can't say we're not Indian when we're keeping Indian Standard Time. So thank you to all of you, and good night, everyone.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मेरा नाम ज़फ़र बंगश है और आज का प्रोग्राम जो नूर कल्चरल सेंटर में जिसका एहतमाम किया गया था, इस प्रोग्राम में इंडिया ने जो सिटीज़नशिप अमेंडमेंट एक्ट और नेशनल रजिस्ट्रेशन ऑफ सिटीज़न्स जो लॉज पास किए हैं, उसके तहत इन चीज़ों पर तफसीली बातचीत हुई और कश्मीर के हवाले से भी बातचीत हुई। तो एक जो प्रोफेसर हैं जो दलित ओरिजिन के हैं, डॉक्टर जंगम, उन्होंने बहुत अच्छी बातें कहीं। उन्होंने हिंदुत्व आइडियोलॉजी को बहुत अच्छी तरह से एक्सपोज़ किया और आरएसएस के फैशिज़म को भी एक्सपोज़ किया। हालांकि जो इंडिया से डायरेक्टली जो डॉक्टर फैज़ान मुस्तफ़ा वाइस चांसलर हैं यूनिवर्सिटी के, वो ज़रा माइल्ड पोजीशन अडॉप्ट कर रहे थे, लेकिन डॉक्टर जंगम ने खुलकर बात की और इंडियन फैशिज़म اور RSS کے فیشزم کو ایکسپوز کیا. اسی طرح انگلینڈ سے شمع نقشبندی تشریف لائی تھی. یہ لائر ہیں اور انہوں نے کشمیر کے حوالے سے بات چیت کی اور بتایا کہ کشمیر میں جو مظالم ہو رہے ہیں, جو قتل عام ہو رہا ہے اور جو انڈین گورنمنٹ کر رہی ہے, جو 70 سال سے 72 سال سے جو کچھ کشمیر میں ہو رہا تھا, وہی سچویشن جو ہے اب اس کو نارملائز کیا جا رہا ہے انڈیا میں. اور اس نے یہ لنک اسٹیبلش کیا کہ چونکہ کشمیر کے حوالے سے ہندوستان کے مسلمان جو تھے وہ خاموش رہے, وہ اس کو کچھ نہیں کرتے رہے, تو آج ان پر بھی یہ عطاب نازل ہوا ہے. اور اس سے انڈیا کے پورے سسٹم کو جو ہے بہت بڑا دھچکا لگا ہے. پروگرام کے دوران کوشچن آنسر سیشن بھی ہوا جس میں بہت سے آڈینس نے سوالات اٹھائے کشمیر کے حوالے سے بھی اور انڈین اور ہندو فیشزم کے حوالے سے بھی, اور میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ بہت ہی کامیاب پروگرام رہا. اس کو بڑی تعداد میں لوگوں نے اس میں شرکت کی اور بہت ہی مفید معلومات جو ہیں وہ لوگوں کو فراہم کی.
I'm Aziza Khanji, and I was the MC of this discussion that we have just had at Noor Cultural Center, organized by Canadians Against Oppression and Persecution, on recent developments in India, including the Citizenship Amendment Act and the abrogation of the status of Kashmir. It was a very successful discussion with a great deal of engagement and interest from the audience, and our expert commentators really helped us to walk through and understand these issues that are of great seriousness, not only for Indians but for the entire international community.
Yeah, this was an amazing event today. I think it's heading in the right direction. I think we need more events like this ongoing, and especially to get the discussion going both ways. And I think it's a start in the right direction, and inshallah we're going to keep doing more programs like this. And it's a welcome, it's refreshing, especially for the society.
Hello, good evening. This is Yusuf Sayed. My name is Yusuf Sayed. I am the co-founder and the chairman of Canadians Against Oppression and Persecution, KOP. So this organization we have formed a couple of months ago in the rise of mob lynching in India, the Kashmir lockdown, and so many human rights issues all across the world. So we have formed this organization after discussing with so many people, and we were trying to form an alliance of people, alliance of organizations, or alliance of community activists and advocacy groups to make one big platform to raise human rights issue for the prevention of human rights issue internationally and nationally. So today it was a big effort to bring the issues, the Indian Constitution, the new Constitution of India, so which is very discriminative and against the Muslim minorities of India. We want to raise voice. So we have good speakers today, and the turnaround from the people was very good, and the responses. I'm extremely happy that about over 200 people, they joined us, and for 3 hours it was a rigorous, very educational effort, and people were so engaged, asking questions, listening to the speakers. And we want to thank the people of Toronto and people joining from outside for joining us today into the seminar and making this a big event. And the journey is not finished here. This is the beginning of our journey, and we will make all efforts to make alliance with more organizations, and we want to have the voices of the people heard, and we will be connecting with people. Thank you so much.